Excellent. Well, good evening. My name is Amy Minervini, and I'm an instructor at LCSC. I teach English. I wanted to start by acknowledging that we all gather today on Indigenous homelands at LC State in Seminicum, Lewiston, on the Indigenous homelands of the Nimipu Nez Perce tribe. We acknowledge the Nimipu as original caretakers since time immemorial and recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and to their ancestors. We wish to take this opportunity to express our deepest appreciation and respect for the ongoing relationship built between Lewis Clark State College and the Nez Perce tribe. Kutsiyaya. Thank you. And thank you for attending this evening's Black History Experience event. The Black History Experience at LC State seeks to offer a safe, welcoming, and inclusive space for learning and sharing, guided by the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hope that you will actively seek to challenge any personal biases, assumptions, and preconceived stereotypes, and approach differences with openness and curiosity. We are very excited about the events we have put together to celebrate the Black History Experience. And I'd like to thank our committee members, Dr. Sarah Graham, Dr. Marlo Daly Galliano, and Jada Wims, and our sponsor, the Rose Hill Estate. We appreciate you being here today as we amplify Black voices and hear our speakers' individual stories. Please place questions in the YouTube chat, or if that isn't working, text questions to 208-717-4545. That's 208-717-4545. And now I will turn it over to Jada Wims, an outstanding senior at LC State, who will introduce today's phenomenal speaker, Mikailah Thompson.
A crucial component to the Black History Experience has been community organizing and activism in the fight for civil rights. This past year, Mikailah Thompson organized the first Juneteenth celebration in Lapwai, Idaho, which will become an annual event. According to Thompson, the event aims to celebrate and bring awareness to Black culture while shining a light on the importance of maintaining a strong sense of tribal identity. She has also been a featured speaker at Black Lives Matter rallies. She has been acknowledged for her speeches and participation affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement, alongside her efforts of generating discussions in regard to race in rural communities. Thompson is a Nimipu tribe member and LC State alumna. She graduated in May of 2020 with a major in business and communication, with minors in Nez Perce language, leadership, and marketing, and currently resides in Alexandria, Virginia. She is an expert beadwork artist, podcast host, and event coordinator. Let's welcome Mikailah Thompson.
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction. I've never been called an expert, but I'll take it. So cool. Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for having me. I'm very, very grateful. So Tots Kalawat, Ina Monique Bas, Telekayun Mai, Kasoyapo Timtki, Mikailah Thompson, Naitz Hiwis, Diane Ellenwood, Ka Nakats Hiwis, Chloe Half Moon, Ka Nakpluk Hiwis, Delbert Ellenwood, Yintao Yetsa, Alexandria, Virginia. So good evening, everyone. My name is Mikailah Thompson. I come from the family of Chloe Half Moon and Delbert Ellenwood. And I currently live in Alexandria, Virginia. So I believe this is the Potawatomi land, Potawatomi and Potomac people. So again, I'm very, very much excited to be able to be here with all of you today. I was very excited to be able to touch on reclamation and representation, just because it's something that I'm very passionate about. And because just based on the experience that I have had within this community and surrounding communities, I realize how important it is, especially for children, to kind of gain their self-confidence, and how they do that is very, very important. And by being able to see themselves not only in media, but in just spaces in general, whether it is going to the store, whether it's their way to the store, whether it's, no matter what it is, it's very important because it encourages that self-confidence, which leads to more opportunities and the paths that they choose going down the line and within their future. So it heavily impacts not only children, but I think even people my age or people in college, high school students, etc. It's very, very important. And I personally can remember my first experience that really kind of generated with me, which was just recently in terms of representation. So within the Black and Brown communities, it's very common not to be seen. It's very common not to see people that look like me. And then me being Black and Native, I've never had that representation. And if I did, I think it would go a long, long way, starting from a young age of understanding what I could do, what I could potentially do, who I could be like. Those role models, just in a visual sense, weren't really there when it came to media and coming to the community. I lived both on the East Coast and here in the East Coast and in Lapwai, Idaho, which is where I'm from originally. And I realized how much it lacked. And I think in both spaces. So I think in more urban communities and cities, you would think that there is more diversity, but when it came to being Native, I was never really, was never really felt or understood in that sense, and still am not today. It's crazy being now in the DC area, and there's so many people who just still don't understand that Native Americans don't exist. And then being on the res and being in the school systems, being in LCSC even, there wasn't any or not very much representation for Black people either. So I think if I had representation and if I had someone that looked like me or had someone to listen to via Zoom, I think it would be very encouraging and comforting. But just to run it back, in terms of when I kind of first really seen and felt seen was actually just recently. I want to give a huge shout out to Sarah Graham and even Amy right now, because when I heard the land acknowledgement my senior year of college, I just remember feeling seen. I remember feeling like not only did I matter, my people mattered. Not only did my people matter, my ancestors mattered. It was a form of representation that was so small, but was so huge as well. So I think if we were able to get more of that, if we were able to fight for that, just to have that simple acknowledgement in classrooms, especially within not only elementary schools, but especially high schools, not only high schools, but especially colleges, not only colleges, but in business and organizations before they have meetings or when they have conferences. That's extremely, extremely important. So just being acknowledged, first and foremost, acknowledging the land that you're on, I think just in any sense, gives that respect, gives that form of reclamation for that tribe, and getting to understand that tribe is obviously the next step. So I just want to say thank you for doing that, especially at the start of this presentation. And when you think about representation, it seems very straightforward. It seems very clear cut. It's something that, should be easy to understand. But if it was that easy, and everyone understood that statement and what it really truly meant in terms of their community, I wouldn't have this platform right now, which I'm very grateful for, but I wouldn't be speaking to any of you if it still wasn't an issue within the community, if it wasn't something that someone else had to listen to and get to truly understand. So, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think by those that are present, getting to understand why representation is important and understanding what it truly means really goes a long way, depending on what you do with the information and depending on what you look into after this and pass on to other people. So with that kind of being said, understanding it and what it is and where it comes from for the Black community is a whole nother kind of topic, which I'll touch on. I don't like to feel like I'm preaching at people or teaching people necessarily. I want to be able to speak on my own experiences and what you want to draw from it, or, ask questions about. I am more than happy to answer. And so when you talk about people of color, and especially the Black community, all of which we've had negative affiliations of, we've always had negative affiliations of representation within media. And if you want to take it all the way back, just kind of through time, you have at the start of media, right? You have people when they first kind of started coming up with television, coming out with film, coming out with shows. You seen Black people, but we weren't represented in a way that really truly reflected who we were as people or who we were, before pre-enslavement. So at the start of media, you have the mammies, you have the Uncle Toms, you have enslavement. It was always us bowing down to white people because of white superiority in that time frame. And then as you move forward, you have the Blackface. You have monkeys in children's movies symbolizing Black people. And Disney has a ton of subliminal and sometimes very straightforward aspects that actually represents how much racism is played within these cartoons, whether it's kind of noticed or not. It's not going to be noticeable to children by any means, but Disney has played a big role in that. But they've obviously gotten better. They've gotten a lot better. I'm a huge Disney fan, but just imagine that being as a child, you know what I mean, and seeing constantly Black people waiting on the white race, you know, and so having these representations of us never really helped with our self-confidence and understanding who we could be. What was our potential? It was always to serve someone else. Now, if you move forward from those moments, you don't really see much of us, period. You know, you don't see much of us at all. And during this time period, this was a time period of segregation. So we weren't wanted on any platform whatsoever. It was the apparent time period of just extreme hatred. So that's like the civil rights movement. That's when you have, you know, the Fannie Lou Hamer, the Angela Davis, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, you know, the list can go on and on and on. So when it came to representation within the media during that time frame, we really weren't being represented whatsoever. You know, they were trying to silence us as much as they possibly could and kind of muzzle us as much as we could. And with the civil rights movement, even though you've kind of seen, you know, there's a lot of shoulders that we stand on to get to who we are now, get to where we are now, you know. And so with that, they never really wanted to portray us. They didn't want us to succeed. I mean, think about Malcolm X in general. He was kind of played out to be this very hateful man who was angrily standing up for his people and just painting that picture within the media of who we were for people that were actually fighting for change. And so that's who we were painting out to be. And then even during that same time period, think about Emmett Till. You know, and those of you who have known Emmett Till, who has a very, very, you know, heartbreaking story. Imagine being a child and seeing that media on the TV, you know? So it wasn't always being portrayed in the best ways to where we really felt like we were being seen for who we were. It was always death. It was always hatred. It was always pointing the finger. It was always the devil. It was always this or always that. And it was nothing that we really truly were. Because when you go into these Black communities, when you go into the Black community, especially during that time frame, it's nothing but filled with love, you know, it's nothing but filled with triumph, you know. And so being able to where we were just kind of muted or not seen once, so being muted and not being seen whatsoever, that was kind of our reality during that time period. Now, if you move forward a little bit more, you have the war on drugs, you know, 70s to 90s era, you're constantly seeing Black people painted as convicts. You're constantly seeing Black people being played in movies while they're, you know, robbing someone. There's theft, there's drug affiliation, you know, and the sad part about it is within those media coverages that were being played about us, a lot of these were false. Even to this day, you have people who are in jail for life for marijuana, and they're in a state that is now legal. And so a lot of these stereotypes were made off of these news anchors and these news TV shows, and they still kind of stand today, you know. And if you really think, and I'm sure most people or some people may know, and you see it on the news every day, unfortunately, to where we're being accused of something that we didn't do because this person felt inferior, this person felt threatened, you know, because he was a Black man. So we have these stereotypes today that are still on us from all of these pictures that were painted from the beginning of time. Once media was established and a Black person was on the screen, it was always in a negative light. And so now we still sometimes have those stereotypes for people who aren't open-minded, for those people who aren't exposed to representation, for those people who refuse to understand history and actually ignore Black excellence, you know. And the crazy part about it is Black culture is the most popularized culture. You know, without Black culture, you wouldn't have a lot of these trends on social media. You wouldn't have a lot of these fashion statements that people are making. We literally create the culture. And I'm saying only Black people, all Black and brown people have a major influence in pop culture. Without us, you wouldn't really have much of a pop culture to really refer to or to get excited about, whether it's the music you listen to, the clothes you listen to, you know. And that's a whole nother conversation in regard to our influence and how much it has been kind of robbed of us in that way. But it's because we're painted as somebody who was less than, or somebody that was convicting a crime, or a felon, or who was angry. So the media has never really done us justice. And now if you fast forward into today, I think representation has greatly improved tremendously from the time that the time period I started from, which were the mammies and the blackface, compared to now. It's like, yeah, there's a lot more representation, but is it enough? I think there's racism today plays another role. The racism hasn't gone anywhere. It's just been taken advantage of in different ways. So for example, tokenism. For those of you who don't know what tokenism is, it's the diversity hires. It's the affirmative action hires. It's the one person, in the organization who's Black in a room full of white people. It's the one person on the front of a magazine cover, or the one feature they have just to say that they aren't racist, that they are diverse, that they do appeal to a lot of people. But the representation just really isn't correct. And even within photographs, within media, the way they touch up, our skin, the way they do their hair, not having a Black hairstylist, all of these little factors contribute into not accurately painting the correct representation, or even caring to correctly paint the right representation. So there's a lot of ways today that the media really kind of has that same, I guess, lack of understanding of how to correctly paint that picture of representation. So when you think about what representation should be, like I mentioned before, Black and brown youth should be able to see themselves not only in media, but in the communities that they live in too. And when we're talking about rural communities, that's a whole nother game, a whole nother kind of topic. I just know for myself, and growing up and living in multiple rural communities, in many instances, it's like you feel invisible. Like, imagine walking into a room and you feel invisible. Imagine walking into the room or being the only person people are staring at as if they haven't seen a person of color before, And so I think within rural communities, where it really, really lacks is just, I think, acknowledging the histories, acknowledging the people within that community, supporting those communities, which I'll get into kind of like a little bit later. But it really, with youth especially, it kind of makes you feel as if something's wrong with you. If you go into some place and you live in a community to where you don't see yourself whatsoever, or when you're watching TV and you don't see yourself whatsoever, it kind of makes you feel as though something is wrong with you. It kind of makes you feel as though, you're different. In all actuality, you're not different, and in some youth, they get told that they're different, or they get treated like they're different, when that's not the case. And I think it happens in a lot of school systems as well, to where some people might be making fun of another child for the texture of their hair. Some person might be making fun of another child for, the food they bring to school or the clothes they wear, when that shouldn't be happening whatsoever. It's up to those teachers, it's up to those instructors to really show and to paint that picture of people of color in a different light, so that way they don't feel, those students should feel comfortable enough to make those jokes, to make those comments, to outcast that child in that certain way. And so I think one of the things, and I think even though it is Black History Month, I think what we teach and how we teach it and what we put on the forefront is especially important. I think it's a time to where, Black history, like I mentioned before, is by all means very, very important. I wouldn't be where I am. My dad wouldn't be where he is. My grandparents wouldn't be where they're at if we weren't able to stand on those shoulders of those who fought before us. But at the same time, I think it's also very important to establish Black excellence as well. Talk about LeBron James, talk about Black Panther, talk about all of these things that are trending within Black media that really show us that, that yes, we're business owners. Yes, we're chefs. Yes, we're artists. Yes, we're, billionaires, millionaires, although money's not necessarily the main topic either. But yes, we are creative minds and creative individuals. And I think it's very important to paint that picture regardless, you kind of have to paint that picture of where we've been. You have to paint that picture of where we came from and understand that we were brought here with nothing. We were brought here in slaves. We were brought here in bondage, and there's so many ugly truths to our history that, unfortunately, these are accuracies of our country. And you have to be able to share those, but also equally share where we are going, where we are heading, where we have been. I think that representation is very important because it doesn't give people the opportunity to look back at our downfalls and tease other kids, because I've been in that situation myself, to where I was in high school and I remember there was one Black picture up on the wall of Maya Angelou. And obviously Maya's phenomenal. So me, knowing who that person is, and then seeing the other Black girl in the class who was raised within that community, she was getting teased, and she was kind of a bully herself. I don't want to put it that way, but she was kind of a bully herself. And she was getting teased for the color of her skin, the color of her hair, referring her to that picture, making fun of Maya and then comparing it to her. And it was just kind of a whole mess. She's just sitting here awkwardly laughing about it. But what are you going to do when you were raised in this community and you didn't see anybody else that looked like you? And people you've grown up with all your life is teasing you. Are you going to stand up for yourself? Are you going to kind of go against the odds and try to be, and be somebody who stands up for what's right, just knowing that what they're doing is wrong? That's kind of a hard thing to do, and then also just seeing teachers. I remember being in the classrooms with teachers and they didn't really understand that whether they knew what they were doing was wrong. They never really gave any repercussions to these kids by what they were doing to the girl, or doing to those that were getting bullied for the color of their skin or for what they look like. And that's when I say it really comes down to knowledge. And it's really hard to kind of establish yourself in a rural community when you are a person of color because you don't see anybody like you. You don't know who to turn to. You don't know who's kind of in your circle, And so I think there's a few challenges that kind of comes with that. And just being someone who is a victim of that, to where they don't really know how to respond, or if they were growing up in this community for so long, it's kind of hard to establish yourself when, there isn't really anyone to kind of back you up, And so, just kind of circling back, I think besides just Black history, Black excellence needs to be shown too. And shout out to everybody who's putting this together this month, because it is showing the range of just Black culture. And I think that's kind of the highlight of Black history. It doesn't necessarily have to be only history. It doesn't only have to be textbook. It can be where we currently are, because we're making history, and James Baldwin has once said, I'm not paraphrasing, but basically being a Black person in America and individualizing yourself is the most dangerous thing you can do in this country. And it's true, because it's like, we don't always get the support that we deserve. We don't always get the acknowledgement that we deserve, so it can be a hard thing to do. But I think by representing us and showcasing all sides of us, of who we are as a culture, it really does improve the confidence and creates the foundation of opportunity for the next generation. So when you think about reclamation is another term, in many ways, or in many terms, some people have kind of created stems from this word. So you've probably have heard decolonization, you've probably heard indigenizing spaces. There's a number of ways to describe reclamation. And what it truly means is just not adjusting ourselves in white spaces, that are equally ours. That means that we shouldn't have to adjust who we are, or lessen ourselves, or not speak up when we should be speaking up, or just voicing our opinions in these spaces, especially white space, or predominantly white spaces, And I think when I think about my mom, when I think about my dad, when I think about my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents, they all kind of come from eras to where it was they couldn't make white people uncomfortable, and if they did, that obviously came with repercussions by if you did make them uncomfortable. And it's really a generational thing of how we kind of maneuvered in the world, how much we silenced ourselves, not looking too much of a certain way or whatever it is. And just now realizing, coming to here I am being where I'm at now, that time has long and gone past. And I think everybody knows kind of this generation has been speaking up for themselves. And I think that's a really, really beautiful thing, but it's something that we kind of all have to do together. It can't be just up to one person, up to one race, up to one culture. How do we do that? And how do we actually create equality and change? So that way it is better for the next generation. And so when I think about my personal experiences in particular, reclamation and representation really just go hand in hand. I was actually having this conversation with my co-host today for my podcast on quantum theory. We were kind of having this conversation that we just kind of fell upon. And we asked ourselves this question as if I asked my co-host this question. I said, do you feel as though you have a responsibility as a Black Native to teach Black indigeneity? Do you feel like you have a responsibility just being who you are to enforce change? Is it our job to teach the masses of how we should be treated? Do we have to be the spokesperson of, the Black race or the Native race? And my first answer was no. It's not my job. It's not, it's not my responsibility to do that. But amongst those circumstances, I think it's not that straightforward either. I think when I'm being called upon to do something, or if I'm being called upon to share my experience, of course, that's something I'm going to do hands down. I don't want anybody speaking for the Black race or the Native race or whatever race you are. You shouldn't want someone else's race to speak for that, and that's kind of how I fell into the protesting. And when I fell into some of the events that I did, I'm like, well, if someone's going to speak about the Black experience, it should be Black people, and I don't consider myself a speaker necessarily, but it's something that I do. If I feel like, no one else in the room can kind of paint that accurate picture, then that's what I'm going to do. And so, but yeah, I said, no, it's not necessarily my responsibility to teach anyone anything. That's up to them and that's their own decision. But I said, it is my opportunity. It is my responsibility to uplift my own people. Unfortunately, racism isn't going away fast enough, but rather than being angry or rather than feeling like I have to teach everybody else something, I would rather put my energy into uplifting my own people. I'm not going to focus on racism, but I'm going to focus on excelling my own people. What can we do? How can we get stronger? How can I represent these kids, or how can I represent my own community to the best of my ability? So that way, those that are watching or those that want to do the same thing that I'm doing, or those who maybe don't want to do anything what I'm doing at all, but they see that something could be done or something that they're interested is actually possible. I want to give all my resources. I want to be able to, have those uncomfortable conversations so things can change. That I do feel like is my responsibility. I feel like my mom worked too hard for me. My parents have worked too hard for me. My grandparents, my great grandparents have all, and my ancestors beyond that have, I wouldn't be here without them. So therefore, I'm going to do the best thing that I could do by representing who they were, by, making a better tomorrow for my community. So I think with that, I think everybody who's listening right now, the people who actually want to make change aren't watching this necessarily, or who don't want to make change aren't watching this necessarily. It's like the ones that are actually watching this video right now, I appreciate you because it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as if I'm giving my experience and I'm reflecting on myself. Hopefully that encourages you to reflect on yourself. Like, okay, well, what is my story? What are some of my experiences? What are some of the things that I've seen? And it also means taking accountability as to, okay, what have I encouraged? And then you take all of that and you really just try to influence those around you in those community. But I always say, do your research, always, understand and become knowledgeable, which is very, very important. But I think also where equality truly lies in having that sense of community is by listening. just simply listening. And I think for white people to go and actually support the endeavors of the Black and Brown members of their community, that goes leaps and bounds, I believe. And that's how we that's how we create more diversity. That's how we create a more sense of community. And I think by painting that picture and being able to, show people that we do operate, together, I think that's a great form of representation as well. So not only, supporting your community, Black and Brown community members, but also paying attention to the issues. So even with some of my events, and speaking of the Juneteenth event, it's like when I'm there, my whole point of that event is to bring community together in solidarity and understanding that Black and Native issues kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways, but also spotlighting Black culture, where it's been, where we are, where we're going. And we also talk about a lot of the issues that not only do we have within our community, but within ourselves. We talk mental health. I know on my podcast, mental health is extremely, extremely important. And so just with all of that, we speak about who we are as a culture, and so not only paying attention to the issues, I think paying attention to the beauty as well is where you start listening to that, understanding where we come from, seeing the laughs, the way how we interact with one another, see what we put within our, if there's a Black and Brown business vendor, just understanding, getting to understand that business owner. If it's a powwow, understanding the beauty of the culture. I mean, there's so many things I think that are so relevant to today and why we operate the way we operate, and being able to give the best representation as opposed to representing stereotypes is to really just go in and listen and actually engage. How I personally have tried to contribute to reclamation and representation is speaking engagements for one. So being able to take this and hopefully, the right people listen. And like I said, when I was a kid, if I ever had somebody that looked like me talk on something, I think that would motivate me a lot more. And hopefully if I inspire one person or, that would be great. But I think being able to see someone that looks like you doing something, and if you can go to someone live and listen to a seminar, listen to a conference, listen to a talk, etc., I think that goes a long way as well. I also try to contribute to the little free library here in Lapwai by, I always fill it with books when I can. So like this month, we're doing some Black history books. And I don't do just Black history books. I do Native books. I do Asian books. I do, Indian books. I do different books just to show and to represent different types of people. And I think by you guys doing that in your community, whether it's in Lewiston, whether it's in Clarkston, whether it's in Kamei, I think by being able to show kids, hey, this is today's world. And then some of the things that are in the books reflect some of today's issues, or there's just beauty in everything and everyone. And so what we're feeding our community is very, very important. Like I mentioned, events, I try to do events. The Juneteenth event is a big one. Which unexpectedly got big. I did not expect it to kind of have the effect that it did. Shout out to Tommy Miles Williams. He's amazing as well. He's like my right-hand man in doing the Juneteenth event. We've done it 2 years now. And our really goal is just to project the message and wipe out kind of July 4th. There's so many ugly histories to some of these holidays that a lot of people don't really understand. And Juneteenth for us is a day of celebration. If you go to any Black function, it's just all good. It's just a good time. So, and even Native functions as well. I mean, it's on the res, so it's kind of a Native function, but it's all in good graces to where people come and they really just listen. They listen to our speakers. We have elderly speakers who talk about their experiences. We have performers, we have artists, we have food vendors. It really just shows Black culture in another light that you don't see in this town, but yet there are plenty of Black people as well. I'm not saying we make up 50 or even, I don't even know if it's 25% of Lewiston Clarkston. There aren't too many Black people in Lewiston Clarkston, but there are Black people in Lewiston Clarkston. And I think being able to they shouldn't have to feel as though, this isn't their community either, or feel as though, they aren't being seen, or feel as though they have to walk on eggshell, or whatever it is. Everyone should feel comfortable. And so this is an event to not only learn, but to just have a good time, and to listen, and to see the beauty, and to understand the issues, because we're all in one community. So it's important to understand what your communities are facing and how they feel. So that event is really contributes to that. And like I said, the first year, I did not expect for it to kind of get the coverage it got. I just remember setting up and there wasn't that many people there. And then I turned around and then there was all these people there. And I was like, oh, so I felt really, really good about that. And then shout out to Jada Lay when she did the protest. I didn't expect that either. It made me feel really, really good of how many people kind of showed up and showed out. So there are plenty of people within this town that are open to showing representation, that do understand or want to understand more. So I think the next step is just understanding, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we address this issue? Which I'll kind of break down in a little bit, but yeah. And so I try to contribute in what ways that I can. My business, of course, I try to do that as well. Indigenous Create is a very new business. It's a promotion business to where I spotlight just Indigenous creatives, just in every aspect, in every form, locally and just throughout the country. So I think by people being able to see that and to realize, how many people are really adding to the culture and adding to the arts of this country, no matter what it is. I think it's a good spotlight to be able to understand where kind of everyone's backgrounds and where they come from as well. So that's kind of the few ways I try to contribute, but I'm always open for more and being able to kind of collab with other community members on different projects. But like I mentioned before, there are challenges to that. There are challenges to establishing reclamation and representation within this community in particular. This is my own personal experience. I just feel like with some of the challenges when trying to create representation is there are a lot of people that are just stuck within certain mindsets. A lot of people revolve their lives around certain traditions or what has always been done, when in reality, that's no longer the reality, right? So that with Lewiston and maybe some of their events, or Clarkston with some of their events, or even Mapway for that matter, maybe with some of their events, there is this sense of tradition. But I think one thing that people have to realize through that challenge is, just as the rest of the country with certain holidays, is that we all are becoming more aware of what the true realities of this country is. A lot of these things are coming to truth, and whether people choose to deny it or not, that is no longer our reality. There's more people of color coming into these predominantly white communities. There are more, histories being shown on the forefront of what some of these traditions actually mean. So I think being able to check those and to understand what actually are these truths can really help towards moving forward in a positive light. I think another challenge is it's funny, I just thought about it, but I had someone told me, I remember they said, change makers are always leaving, or why are change makers always leaving? And I brought this up before, but it was just funny because it was just like, we kind of giggled about it, but it was kind of sad at the same time, because it is true. And I think a lot of the reasons that a lot of us kind of uproot from, some of these smaller and especially rural communities is because we don't really see ourselves. And sometimes we work so hard to fix something or change something, and then you realize it kind of comes down to who what businesses are supporting these businesses, or if this person has a position of power, what are they really doing? Or it could be a lot, and it can be a challenge for someone who really is trying to enforce change, because like I said, there are a lot of these traditions and people who have always lived in these communities, especially these rural communities where people have been established for so long and they're so used to doing things a certain way. It can be kind of hard when it feels like, there aren't as many people that are kind of putting in the same effort, or there aren't as many people that could be doing more than what they're doing, because realistically, it goes beyond Black History Month. It goes beyond a protest. It goes beyond some sort of holiday to really infect and enforce change, and even though, like I said, I'm super grateful for this platform, hopefully next month I can see another seminar online or on YouTube affiliated with LCSC or affiliated with any business or, within this community that can really paint that picture of success or for change for those that are watching. So like I said, it goes beyond just this month. And that's something that I hope will eventually change, not only within this community or just really within the country, because it can be a little frustrating at times too, as to where, okay, this is the only platform that we're really given throughout the year, or, even Indigenous Peoples Day, to where that's when the only time people are really listening. So we really have to understand and grasp that, hey, representation and diversity really, it goes outside of those months. If you do that, and you do that frequently, that's when you really do have, that's when you really do, you are making steps towards representation. So I think, as I mentioned before, there are multiple ways to establish representation within your community. And so it's important to understand kind of what that looks like. I think we all can contribute in some sort of way. You don't have to be this big name, this top notch. You don't have to have an organization. It literally could be just literally anybody. Within school systems and youth programs, some of the questions that you have to ask are, okay, well, what books are they taking home to read for homework? Which media outlets are being viewed during lessons? Do they know whose land they are on and what the tribe's history is? When I was at LCSC, I just remember there's a lot of people that didn't know the res or, Lapway was just 15, 20 minutes away. I'm like, you didn't know that this, like, Nez Perce County actually meant something, and you didn't know that Chief Joseph over there, there's a lot of things that were common sense for me, of course. But for these students who have been going there for at least 2 years, not to know whose land they were on and the history of it was a little bit disturbing. And then even within the classrooms, I remember getting in an argument with the instructor, and I was just like, I don't really feel seen in this classroom because you're showing me all of the, the homework is to understand each of these different leaders, all of these different politicians, all these laws that were put in place, Declaration of Independence, the list was ongoing. And because I wasn't responding the way the rest of the predominantly white class, or all of the white class was responding, my grade suffered for it. And I was just like, I can't relate to these people. I'm not represented in these people. These laws were never meant for me. I'm like, you're having me do all this research on these different laws and all these different change makers and all these different, these leaders within our country, but I can't relate to them. I'm giving you, I'm writing and I'm turning in my assignments of how this material relates to me, but it doesn't relate to me. You don't excuse me, you don't have anyone that relates to me, so there's a lot of representation that can go on within the classrooms. So that's really important, I think, for teachers and even students to speak up and say, hey, I would like to learn about this, or, and it's not the student's job. Like I said, I think it's important for the instructor. So if you are an instructor, or you are a teacher, or you do head a youth organization, or any type of organization to where you have a group of young minds who are there to learn something, it's kind of your responsibility to teach them the accuracies, as opposed to just staying on traditional curriculum. For business and organizations, those questions you have to ask are, who are you employing? Who are in your ads? Who are you receiving input from for innovation? Who are you partnering with or sponsoring? And then for everyday people, which businesses are you supporting, both in person and online? Which podcasts are you listening to? Which knowledgeable social media accounts are you following that are showing you accurate everyday representations of how we're being treated in this country? Everybody goes to Dutch Bros, which Dutch Bros has their ongoing thing going on now where they're kind of supporting racism, which is a whole nother, you can kind of Google that. But rather than Dutch Bros, it's like, if you're on your way, past Lapway, or if there is a Black or brown business within Lewiston that serves coffee, stop there. There's a great coffee shop in Lapway called Black Bison, so it's like, which businesses are you supporting? Where's that money going? It's time to understand the bigger questions, and kind of just quickly, briefly touching over the Dutch Bros thing. It's just like, for those of you who don't know, you can definitely Google it and how they're kind of violating gaming protocols and actually taking millions of dollars from tribal community. That a lot of people try to say that they aren't racist. They're quick to say, I'm not racist, but how are you upholding racism? My co-host on my podcast brought that question up today. And those are some of the examples. Where's your money going? What is it funding? If someone's being mistreated in front of you, are you saying something? Are you stepping in for something? If somebody's speaking over a Black and brown person while they're trying to talk, that's upholding racism, because in so many ways that's muzzling us. That's there's muzzling us, and then obviously there's the privilege aspect of it. So it's like all of that kind of upholds and contributes to racism, And so I know I don't want to veer too much off, but I think by doing those things, you not only represent us, and you actually, you help us, in that form of equality really kind of goes hand in hand and actually helps us move forward into accurately representing us and showing that, the next generation that we matter. So with all of that, and I'm coming up on my time, if not went over it, I think more importantly, it takes knowledge and understanding of other races and especially other cultures other than your own to truly grasp the importance of representation. If you start there, we have the power of uplifting our youth and our next generation by innovating our community. So that's all I got. I don't want to keep going. I didn't even think I was going to hit that mark. So.
Oh my gosh. We could keep listening, and hopefully we will hear for it. We have a few more questions.
Yes, don't at me.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So one of them came in from the chat. What do you think are barriers for people of color to come work and live in communities like Lewiston? And how do we work to improve representation without the sort of diversity hire or affirmative action claims?
Yeah, so I think, so the first question was, how do we
exactly, some of those barriers.
For a Black person coming into within, one of the things, like I said, I'm only going to speak of, my experiences is with me personally, my parents just growing up, they always had me understand who I am. That was the most important thing that I have had. So I think with a Black and brown person coming into this community and learning how to function, but feel, especially if you're coming from a city or you're coming from another state, coming into this, I think the most important thing is to understand who you are, because in a lot of ways, just as anywhere else, you're going to see subliminal racism. And I mean, that's systematic racism. So I think by understanding who you are and not allowing other people to walk over you, and if you do talk, be confident about it, be able to address certain things that other people, it's okay to make other people uncomfortable. That's what you're supposed to do to enforce change. No one should be comfortable, especially if it's in a situation that someone shouldn't be comfortable in, so in navigating as a person of color in a rural community, it can be a hard thing at times, but I think it's also important not to paint that picture of the stereotypes I think that are placed on us as well. If some people are going to push your buttons, some people are going to say things that kind of bother you, but realistically, it comes from a lack of knowledge. So I think if you have that understanding, and rather than getting quick to fight or, get up angry as you should be, I think that kind of goes bounds if you can speak on knowledge and speak and put people in their place, but in a more knowledgeable way, because I think that's the most important thing is people lack understanding. And then the second question was, how do you create diversity without don't be a diverse, don't do affirmative action. That was just an example of how we have been represented and how tokenism has played a factor within, especially not only politics, within business, within capitalism. These are some of the things and some of the laws that were set in place which were meant for that time period. And, but we shouldn't still be in that time period. So as I kind of listed before, okay, well, how do we establish representation within our communities, within school systems, within books? What are you teaching these kids? You have to learn first before you even teach or even try to team up with somebody. Like, you have to understand where we're coming from first. How you can't just put a Black person on an ad and just, okay, well, there's representation. Well, how are they being represented? What are they wearing? Is their skin tone, is the lighting okay? Are they the only person in the picture? Because then it goes to show, yeah, you are doing it just to say, this is representation. So once you actually understand where culture is coming from, you wouldn't have to think twice about it when you're actually, trying to accurately paint that picture of representation. So just learn about it first. Don't just do it for the views or do it for, other people. Once you get that understanding, you'll know exactly what to do. And I think some of that comes with just partnering with somebody who actually is knowledgeable. Get to know the Black girl in the class, or the Native girl in the class, or the Latino person in the class, and just, ask questions, but be mindful of how you're asking these questions. And once you actually get to know them a little bit more and understand, hey, well, we're both in this community. How do you feel underrepresented? That's where you can start as well. So it's just asking questions, and don't feel stupid about it, So, I love asking questions. I don't care if I look stupid, but if I feel like I can get to know another person and accurately represent them and get to know them and share their culture and share their history, then that's a good feeling. And I think also, not to keep rambling on, I think another thing that's important is, you don't always have to be the one to speak up either, just to kind of get that credit of representing another culture. I think it's important to partner with some of these other cultures and give them that platform to represent how they choose to be represented. So that's also important too.
Sorry. Okay, Jada's got a question.
Firstly, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate your ability, to shed light on a lot of these issues and things that might not be as obvious to people who don't personally experience them. And one thing that really stuck with me that you said was, we can only speak from our experience. We can't speak for the Black and Brown community, as a whole. But one thing I'm curious of is, from your experience, how do you address poor representation and these misconceptions without, having that big platform? Because a lot of times, for me, I do run into things like misrepresentation, but I don't really have the ability to fight with media, and a lot of times in these rural communities, that's really the only source of representation that we get in these smaller communities. I'm just curious how you address those in a not so formal setting.
I don't adjust. I think that's kind of where you have to think of, that's how you have to think about it. I don't have to fit into any box. I don't have to fit in any place. And I don't feel like it's not my responsibility to teach anybody what they're doing wrong. And I think, and when I realized that, which was just probably like kind of last year, I remember just feeling so kind of angry or upset, or things would irritate me because we are being misrepresented in so many ways because of their lack of knowledge and because of their choice of not to get more knowledge. And I realized, I'm like, I can be angry as much as I want. I can be irritated as much as I want. But what am I doing? Where's my energy really going? So that's why, I started doing my own events. That's why I'm like, what, if these teachers or these education laws are being passed or whatever it is, I'm going to fuel my community by giving them books that they should read. I can't focus on anybody else except for myself. We all have a phone. We all have, this is the era of social media. What am I posting on my page? What am I posting on my story? So when it comes to reclamation, that means changing the narrative. That means, doing what you can do for you without thinking about somebody else, not without feeling as though you have to get permission, as though you have to check somebody else on their behavior. What am I putting out into the world? How can I address this in my own way? So if someone is, let's say they're misrepresenting you in person, by all means, tell them that you're misrepresenting me, or you're misrepresenting this culture. And that's your platform to do what you want to, say what you feel like you need to say in that moment. But otherwise, if it feels like it's getting to be a lot, or you feel like you're noticing it, but you don't know who that person of power is, you don't have to, run that that race of trying to figure that out just to tell that person off. No, let me post my accurate representation on my social media. Who's head of the newspaper of LCSC? How do I get a column in there? I think it really falls upon us, and what are we doing, and how am I going to represent my own people? How am I going to represent myself? And just take it into your own hands and really put that message out there. That's kind of what I've done anyway. At least I try to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Mikailah, some teachers ask students to maybe advocate for a community change type of topic, maybe writing call to action letters, or people feel compelled to do those on their own. But then they have that fear of, what is my one voice going to do? Or perhaps just, just sort of being a bit afraid of how is my one voice or one letter going to make a difference or a change? How would you kind of counter that, trepidation when it comes to actually taking a stance and advocating for things that, a person is passionate about?
Yeah, I think it's important not to get intimidated by the bigger picture. I think you have a lot of these people within medias who have these huge platforms, and you feel like you have to be that person, like you have to be the next MLK or the next Malcolm. No, they all started somewhere as well, and I think it goes it moves mountains to have social media. Start there, put a picture up of whatever you feel. Maybe if it was an issue in the community, maybe it's a write-up. There's so many ways and so many things we have access to nowadays that we didn't back then, that at some point, the right person is going to see it. Somebody's going to be listening. So start where you're most comfortable at. You don't have to, jump on the radio or do all this. I mean, I know with me, when I kind of first, when Jada asked me to do the protest, I'm like, like I said, I'm not a speaker. No one's going to listen to me. I don't know what I'm going to say, but the more questions I got, and that led to, hey, well, do you mind talking to this person? So someone's going to be listening. Somebody's going to be paying attention. You shouldn't have to feel like you have to move mountains to get your voice out there. And it takes word of mouth. It takes people, if you have a friend, hey, this is really important with me. Do you mind collabing on me with this by doing a podcast? Do you mind collabing with this? I really want to approach this business and what they're doing. That person tells who they know. That person might tell two other people. So just start and do something. Malcolm X said, if you don't stand for something, you'll stand for anything. So if you just get started and you're passionate about something, it's worth you going out there and trying to enforce change, especially if it's for the betterment of a large group of people. So just start anywhere. Just telling a person about your idea, whatever it is.
I love that. I love the fire and enthusiasm and that spirit of collaboration, that it's a theme that has run through your presentation today, and I appreciate that. So we have one final question here. You've been very successful as a student, as an artist, and as an activist leader. Could you talk about some of the projects that you're working on that excite you?
Oh man, that excite me. Let's see. Honestly, the most current project that I am working on is me. So last year, and I'm very career oriented. If anybody knows me, I like to work. I'm a creative, I'm an artist. That's something I love to do. But I think it's very important to maintain that sense of mental health. I think especially within the Black and Brown communities, it's not something that's often talked about. Now it is. It's been slowly kind of becoming on the forefront, which is really, really good. But I think we've always kind of been, we've always had to have it together. We couldn't make mistakes, or those flaws are going to be pointed out. And even from our parents, it's like they work their butt off because we are different. And, I didn't, as much of career oriented that I am, mental health is extremely, extremely important, and so I usually put everything into my art. I love beadwork. But this year I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the things that bring me joy. And that's my current project, is me. So I'm trying to kind of put that aside, but also just maintain that sense of identity. And I've just been learning. I think that's something I've been enjoying as well, is like even things like this, being able to speak, it encourages me to learn more. It encourages me to research more and kind of tap into who I am. So it's just me just kind of figuring myself out just as everybody else is, but having fun while I'm doing it, living in my truth, and just, working on what urges me to create. So with everything that I do, I put a little bit of piece of me, but I kind of want to tap into other sides of me to bring out the best into more of my work and future works. So aside from that, I guess current projects is just beadwork and upkeeping and getting to know other individuals. I'm going on an Instagram live right after this with another individual, Ty Simpson. A lot of people know her. And so just learning and engaging with people and networking, just getting myself out there is kind of what I've been working on.
That's great. So Mikailah, if people wanted to find you, look you up, support your different endeavors and your businesses, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to MikailaThompson.com. I have all my web URLs there, but I am not tech savvy and I don't try to because technology is like improving way too fast for me. So I stick with Instagram. You can find me at Mikailah Thompson, at Beadwork by Mikailah, at Indigenous Creatives, at Quantum Theory Pod. Hopefully in the future, I hire someone very soon to get me on everything else like TikTok and everything else like that. But that's where you can find me. And if you have any other questions, you are more than welcome to DM any of those pages and I will happily respond.
That's great. Well, we thank you so much. Your voice is so powerful. Your story is so powerful. And we just appreciate the time that you've taken today to celebrate the Black History Experience. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you for having me. See ya.
Bye-bye.